Downton Abbey paints this picture of servant life where footmen are hired because they're hard-working, loyal, eager young men who want an honest position in a great house. Thomas Barrow schemes his way up through cunning. William Mason earns his place through earnest devotion. And we, the audience, accept this because it feels right. Surely the great estates of Britain selected their staff the way any employer would, based on competence, character, references. Except they didn't. Not even close. The truth about how British aristocrats actually chose their household staff, particularly their footmen, makes the whole thing sound less like employment and more like shopping for a matched set of decorative candlesticks. Because the single most important qualification for a footman in a grand English house wasn't his work ethic or his references. It was the shape of his legs. If your understanding of British servant hierarchy comes from Downton Abbey, and honestly, for most of us it does, you probably picture something like a strict but fundamentally meritocratic workplace. Carson the butler sits at the top, stern but fair. Mrs. Hughes runs the female staff with quiet authority. Footmen are basically entry-level employees working their way up. The whole system looks rigid, yes, but also somehow dignified. Everyone has a role. Everyone earns their place. The show gives us servants with rich inner lives, personal ambitions, and complicated relationships with their employers. The Crawley family knows their servants' names, worries about their futures, even invites them to the occasional cricket match. And the hiring process, when we see it at all, seems to revolve around interviews, character assessments, and whether someone will be a good fit for the household. This version of servant life isn't exactly wrong. It's just been scrubbed clean and backlit with golden hour cinematography. The real version had all the hierarchy Downton portrays, plus several layers of absurdity and dehumanization that would have made for deeply uncomfortable television. Here is what the historical record actually shows us. When a great house needed a new footman in the 18th or 19th century, the hiring process bore a strange resemblance to buying a horse. The candidate would be assessed on height first and foremost. 6 feet was ideal. Anything under 5'10" was a serious disadvantage. And the reason height mattered so much leads us directly to the Calves. Footmen wore livery, the formal household uniform, which included knee breeches and silk stockings. This meant their legs were on full display every single working day. A footman with thin, shapeless calves was considered an embarrassment to the household. A footman with well-turned, muscular calves was a status symbol. This wasn't some quiet, unspoken preference. It was openly discussed in hiring guides, household management books, and personal correspondence between aristocrats. Samuel and Sarah Adams, who published The Complete Servant in 1825, laid this out plainly. A footman's physical appearance was among his primary qualifications. Height, figure, and the look of his legs in stockings all factored into whether he'd get the position. Some accounts describe candidates being asked to display their calves during the interview process the way you might ask a job applicant to demonstrate a software program today. Just completely routine, and for footmen who had the skills and the height but lacked the calves. There was a solution: false calves. Cork or wool padding strapped beneath the stockings to create the illusion of a shapelier leg. This was common enough that it became a running joke in satirical prints and newspaper columns of the era. Imagine padding your resume, except it's literally padding on your body. The calf obsession was only part of a larger, stranger practice. The wealthiest households didn't just want attractive footmen. They wanted matching ones. A truly prestigious estate would employ footmen in pairs, selected to be as physically similar as possible. Same height, same build, same general coloring. When they stood flanking a doorway or rode on the back of a carriage, they were meant to look almost identical. A living, breathing, matched set. This is where the comparison to furniture becomes unavoidable. These weren't employees in any modern sense of the word. They were decorative elements of the household, chosen with the same eye for symmetry and aesthetics that you'd apply to selecting a pair of urns for a mantelpiece. And here is a detail Downton Abbey would never touch. Footmen in some households weren't even called by their own names. They were given standard house names. James and John were popular choices, regardless of what their mothers had actually named them. When one footman left and was replaced, his successor would inherit the same house name. The identity didn't belong to the person. It belonged to the position. You weren't hiring a human being, you were filling a slot in a visual arrangement. The pay structure reinforced all of this. Taller footmen were literally paid more than shorter ones. A 6-foot footman could command noticeably higher wages than a man of 5'9" doing the exact same work. Some records suggest the premium was as much as a few extra pounds per year. Meaningful money for a servant. Your salary was partly determined by your skeleton. Now, Downton Abbey does get the basic structure of the servant hierarchy right. Butler at the top of the male staff, housekeeper at the top of the female staff, with graduated ranks descending through valets, ladies' maids, footmen, housemaids, kitchen staff, and so on, down to the scullery maid and the hall boy. What the show softens considerably is just how brutally this hierarchy was enforced among the servants themselves. The servants' hall had its own seating order at meals. The upper servants, butler, housekeeper, cook, valet, and lady's maid, would eat the first course with the lower servants, then retire to the housekeeper's room to finish their meal separately, with better food and wine. This daily ritual, sometimes called the pug's parlour separation, was a constant reminder that even among the powerless, there were ranks of powerlessness. Lower servants were expected to stand when upper servants entered a room. A housemaid who spoke out of turn to the butler could face real consequences. And movement between ranks was glacially slow. A hall boy might spend years just carrying coal and cleaning boots before he could even hope to be considered for a junior footman's position. The idea that someone like Thomas Barrow could leapfrog through the ranks using mainly scheming and charisma is one of Downton's most generous fictions. In reality, advancement depended on a grinding combination of time served, positions becoming available through death or departure, and, returning to our theme, whether you had the right physical characteristics for the next rung up the ladder. Merit mattered, but it shared the stage with biology and luck in roughly equal measure. To be fair to Julian Fellowes and his writing team, Downton Abbey was never meant to be a documentary. It's a drama, and it does a remarkable job of making millions of people care about a world that would otherwise remain buried in academic history texts. The show captures the emotional reality of service, the pride, the resentment, the strange intimacy between people who live in the same house but inhabit different universes within it. But there's a specific distortion that's worth naming. Downton consistently frames the servant-employer relationship as one of mutual, if unequal, respect. The Crawleys are decent people who treat their staff well, and the staff generally return that decency with genuine loyalty. This framing makes the class system feel almost cozy, restrictive, sure, but stable and warm, like a firm handshake. The historical reality was that servants were frequently treated as interchangeable components. The matching footmen, the false calves, the house names, the height-based pay, all of it points to a system that valued servants primarily as visual accessories to aristocratic life. When the Duke of Something needed 2 tall men standing behind his chair at dinner, he wasn't thinking about their hopes and dreams. He was thinking about symmetry. This doesn't mean every employer was cruel, many were genuinely kind. But the system itself was built on a foundation that most of us would find deeply uncomfortable today. The idea that a human being's professional worth could be measured in the circumference of his calf muscle. So here's what I want you to fight about in the comments. Given everything we've just discussed, the physical selection, the matching sets, the erasure of individual identity through house names, is Downton Abbey doing us a service by making this world accessible and sympathetic? Or is it doing a disservice by making a fundamentally dehumanizing system look noble and dignified? Does the romanticization help us engage with history, or does it help us forget the parts of history that should make us squirm? I genuinely don't know the answer. I think reasonable people can land on completely different sides of that. So tell me where you land. And if you want more stories where the historical reality turns out to be far stranger than the fiction, this channel is where that happens. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.